Thanks. Well, there aren't that many of you in here, but I think that means that you guys get a bit of a head start on everybody else who doesn't know what they should be earning. And it's really hard to know, right? People don't advertise salaries on jobs anymore. You're unlikely to ask your colleagues unless you know them that well. And if you've got a HR team wherever you are, generally they use these really either outdated models for looking at what cybersecurity people are earning, or they're using something that's really generic for tech, or they're using something that's for consulting firms, and that isn't really targeted at cyber people in general. And what we're seeing is how much salaries are increasing year on year, which I'll come on to in a minute. So I thought I'd go straight in with the actual detail that you all want to see. So these are roles by various levels, kind of, so they're quite general. And there's a big band at a lot of those levels. The top end of those levels generally would be quite London-centric. But what we're seeing is obviously with the rise of home working and remote working, that those salaries aren't necessarily restricted to like London or southeast locations. Companies are regionalising a little bit more as well, and then you find that actually you compete for talent. It's far easier to find a security person in London than it is out here in Wales. So companies are having to compete a little bit more on salary than you otherwise might think. What's also quite interesting about some of these bandings is you don't actually need very much experience to be earning quite good money. To be able to come into security with a year and being paid £35,000, far above the national average, it's not bad. There aren't many careers where you can actually jump in with a salary at that sort of level. And particularly if you're getting to a CISO level, if that's something you do aspire to, salaries go way above that sort of 450, £500,000 mark, even in the UK. So we do a lot of work in the US, and we see people sort of earning $1 million basics, 2 million in some cases. But you're starting to see that in the UK as well. So cyber is kind of a career where you can earn pretty well. If you're looking at slightly more specialist roles, and these are roles where over the last year or so we've seen massive salary growth in these levels. So at the top there, if you're coming into security, maybe you start off in a SOC, you can be earning probably even actually now these days slightly higher than that top end of 55 with just a few years experience. Penetration testers, the salaries vary hugely. It really depends on qualifications. And the benefits there are generally quite good. If that's a career that you're thinking about, you guys will get job offers within 1 to 2 weeks, probably multiple job offers. You can almost name your price in a role like that at the moment. We've seen, as you would expect with GDPR last year, massive increase in salaries for data protection managers. 3 years ago, you probably couldn't earn much more than 50, 55 as a data protection manager. Sort of now you're hitting 150 plus. We've seen a big increase in the amount of incident response roles as well. So you can get some really interesting roles, some very interesting career paths with companies in incident response at the moment. And the bottom level, so cyber awareness roles, they're relatively new. They probably didn't exist a couple of years ago, and now companies are really fighting quite hard to attract those people. What we're seeing is where you want to train your people, you want to make them aware of the risks. Everyone's talking about people, processes and technology, and people being the most important part. So companies are really throwing money behind cyber awareness. So if you feel like taking a little break from some of the more technical aspects, getting more involved with the business, then there are some really interesting roles with some really good salaries there. So as I mentioned, salaries are jumping significantly. So if you're looking at what you're earning sort of 2019 versus 2017, the increases are really big. And as a national average, salaries have increased by 2% over the last 2 years. Salaries for cyber security are increasing up to 40% across the same time period for certain roles. And if I was comparing it to 2015, sort of 2015 to 2017, we were seeing increases of 25, 30% for some roles. So over just a period of 4 years, salaries have jumped massively in cyber. And that probably doesn't surprise any of you. You know, we know there's a lot of job vacancies. We know people are in demand. But I think it's when you start really looking at those numbers, like 40% versus 2% as a national average, that's a really, really big difference. What does get quite interesting is when you come into bonus. So you're laughing. It's not surprising. I was really shocked to see those numbers. So when you're getting job offers, most companies offer you 20%, probably more, as a bonus, but they're not paying that. The vast majority of people earn less than 5% as a bonus. You've got a very few people sort of earning over that 20% level, which a lot of companies are promising. So if you're looking at a job offer or you're getting sold particularly hard on a benefits package, you really need to be asking that company, great, what did you pay out last year? What did you pay out the year before? Because it's not enough to say that that's part of your package. You really need to understand how achievable that is. And I think that certainly shocked me and most of my team, because no company tells a candidate that their bonus will be 5% or less. So it's really important, I think, to make everybody aware of that and what you can actually do about it. So these numbers also really shocked me. So we do research every year. So our salary survey's out at the moment, if you want to go and take it. And the difference between people who stayed and people who left is huge. So if you stayed with your company last year, 36% of you got no salary increase whatsoever. Whereas if you moved, 39% got an increase of 25% or above. So the difference between staying put and moving is really different. So that's great for me. So everyone who wants to move, come talk to me and, move every year. That works for me. But it's a really big difference. And actually, you don't want to move every year, right? You might like where you work. You might like the people that you work with. You might want to build your career where you are. But taking those numbers to your manager, your directors, your HR team, they're quite compelling numbers for what difference you can achieve by moving away from your current company. And as I've said, companies are desperate for people. Any of you are working in companies now probably have gaps in your team. It's probably taken you weeks, if not months, to find the right person. So for you to then find those people and lose them really quickly because you're not keeping up with your competitors, it hurts you, makes you less secure, makes everybody else work harder, more likely to leave, more miserable. And those numbers are really quite different. So from what we've been doing this research over a period of 5 years, and this is the year where we've seen the biggest difference between people staying and people leaving. So people really are sort of looking at those numbers. What can I earn externally? Why am I being constrained by, the business's policy that we don't give pay rises above 2% or 5% in a year, when actually I can go work for somebody just as good, doing just as interesting work, and get paid a hell of a lot more for it. So we also ask people when we do this why they move. The majority of people move for career progression. So it's not all about money. And I get that. For a lot of you, you're probably really passionate about this. It's probably something you've been doing. You probably do projects in your spare time. And actually having that career progression, someone who's going to invest in you, can be much more important than, am I being paid the right amount? Can I move for an extra few £1,000s, but not get the input and the investment in me personally? So most people want to move for career progression. And that's until we compared men and women. So this year we surveyed women separately. The vast majority of women say flexible working is important to them, and that's their number one reason for changing jobs. So there's a real big push for diversity. People want to attract more women into their teams. I could probably talk for a whole other half hour on what women get paid and the difference. It's more, by the way, quite a lot more. So, But companies are really trying to attract women to their teams, and what they're doing is they are paying them more. So they will pay a woman with less experience anywhere up to 30% than they'll pay a man with more experience or more qualifications, because they want to put that diversity into their team. Women get job offers quicker, and they get more job offers than men get. But companies are competing on the wrong thing. Women don't care as much about money as the men do. They care about being able to work flexibly, have home working, and have a different work-life balance. So if that is something that you're thinking about for your own team, then sort of understanding that having a different policy for home working could make a big difference to how you attract people is really important. So if you're asking yourself, well, how do I go and get all that extra money, and, it's hard to know who's paying what, the number one thing you can do if you want to progress your career, if you want that new opportunity, is to network. So events like today are perfect. If you meet sort of 3 or 4 people today, then you've increased your network with people who actually understand that you're passionate about what you do, that you know what you're talking about. And most of those jobs come through to people via their network. So particularly if you want to take an interim role, you want to do contract work, the vast majority of those roles go to people that they already know. Most of those jobs don't ever get advertised. They don't ever go through to a HR team or to someone like me. They literally call up someone they know, someone maybe they've met, and ask them what they're doing. So having a really strong network is really, really important. And how you keep in touch with those people is important as well. It's obviously never been easier to follow up with somebody after an event just on LinkedIn or whatever else you want to use, and to stay in touch with that person so that when you do want to move, you've got a network of people that might want to hire you. You also need to understand what your skills are. And by that I mean your soft skills. So if you are sitting there thinking, do you know what, one day I really do want to be a CISO. Well, do you have the skills to do that job, not just the technical knowledge? As you move up the salary bandings, the most important thing is your social skills, your ability to communicate something very technical to somebody in the business who doesn't understand really what you're talking about, who maybe doesn't care about how it all comes together. They just want to know, what's my risk? What does it cost me? And have you got this in hand? So actually understanding if you've got the skills to do that can be really, really important. And if not, then looking at ways you can go and get them. And then understanding what that career path looks like as well. So security, to everybody who's not in a room like this, is this really niche area of the business. Whenever I tell someone I do recruitment for cyber, they're like, ooh, that's niche. But it's not, right? There's hundreds of different jobs, so many different career paths that you can go down. You don't even need to be technical for a lot of the jobs that you can do within cyber. There's more jobs in marketing or awareness, sales than ever before. And that's something that people don't necessarily realize or get access to either. So actually looking at what jobs exist outside of the current company that you're in could really open up some doors on what you need to do or what you might be interested in. And understanding then how that gets you to where you want to be. So if you want to get into incident response, how do you move up from there from your SOC? Or if you want to get into architecture, what else do you need to understand? What roles do most CISOs do before they become a CISO? So actually trying to look for that information, talk to people like me. We do it all for free if you're looking at jobs or if you just want advice. And we come with quite a lot of knowledge about what jobs are out there and what they look like and what you need to do and what people are hiring. So there's lots of information, lots of people you can talk to get that information if it isn't necessarily obvious to begin with. And then if you have a team already, so some of you in here might have a team, and if you can't just throw money at people, because companies don't let you, then actually worrying about how you retain those people can be a big thing. And there's lots of different things that you can do that don't just involve paying people more. I think it's really important that you look at what you are paying your team, and are you paying them enough, and is that the market rate? But also consider what's important to people. So if we go back a couple of slides, knowing that you've got career progression is the number one reason people leave their jobs. So think about how you as a company can give people that career progression. A lot of people have passion projects that they want to work on. And what we see time and time again when we're trying to headhunt people and entice them out of their current company is they're saying, well, actually, do you know what? These guys, they make me do some boring reports most of the time, but half a day a week I get to go try and break stuff that is really interesting to me, and I get to work on some really interesting projects. And I think if I leave here, I wouldn't necessarily get that opportunity somewhere else. So it's not worth the money for me to leave and not be as interested or as entertained. So think about how much time you can give somebody to work on projects that are actually important to them. A lot of the stuff that's happening, the threats that are out there, they're new and they're innovative. So if you're not allowing your cyber team to innovate internally, then you're actually making yourself less secure anyway. The other reason we see people wanting to leave or not taking job offers that they're getting is they don't feel that security is being taken seriously by the business. How many people have you spoken to where they say they haven't got the investment that they wanted, or they've had to fight really hard for investment? And it's not happening as badly as it did 5 or 10 years ago, where companies really didn't want to pay for security. But it is happening now, where companies have put a lot of money into it and they're starting to wonder where that return is, or where the senior leadership doesn't really understand security, they don't really understand the risk. And therefore you're not getting the investment into the people that you need, or you're not getting to hire the people that you want. So having security taken seriously by the business is really important. And if you're thinking about whether or not you move, it's something you might want to ask as well. You know, what's the investment? How much of budget's increased by? How much backing do we actually have as a security team? And that comes down to your leadership. So it's not unique to cyber that people leave jobs because they hate their boss or they hate the people that they work with. But it is a massive difference. If you've got a CISO that's won awards or that's really known for understanding their technical stuff versus somebody that's come through a risk or a business route, those people get a lot more buy-in from the people that they want to hire. So actually looking at who you're going to be working for, and making sure you've got the right people in at the top can make a big difference to how you retain that team as well. And then look at what companies offer for career progression. And if you are thinking about how you retain your team, what do you offer for career progression? Is there an obvious route? And if there is to you, is it obvious to everybody else in your team? So career progression and progressing yourselves, obviously there's a lot you can do individually, but your company should be supporting you in that as well. There's a lot of talk in the industry at the moment about how career paths aren't necessarily obvious. And companies can make a massive difference to that by helping you understand what that path looks like. So that's probably it in terms of what you should be getting paid and what you can do about it. Does anyone have any questions that they want me to go over on any of that? Yeah.
So I'm quite curious about the salaries you mentioned to start. So do you think this is like a bubble, or do you think that in this, like, you really think cyber is really worth that much money? Because even in other tech fields, like there's quite a gap there between salaries like cyber professionals getting paid and like other like developers and people who provide some sort of distance value. So like, do you think we're due for a correction as well, or is it just
Okay, so is there a bubble in cyber? You know, we're not getting paid, we're getting paid more maybe than other tech roles, and are we going to see a correction or a crash in what that looks like? 5 years ago, I was saying that to everybody that worked with me. I was like, look, guys, this isn't going to last, you just got to ride this while it's happening. And I started my career doing business continuity recruitment, where we saw something really similar. And now, how many business continuity jobs are there? There's very, very few. But it hasn't happened yet. So I feel like maybe I was wrong those few years ago. And when we're seeing, however many, 3 million unfilled jobs by 2021 or whatever the numbers are, I'm not sure that we are about to see that correction. And if we are, then, definitely fingers crossed for me too, right? But if we are, I think it's a few years off. I don't see it coming straight away. So yeah. Did you have one? Sorry?
Yeah, I already answered it.
Okay. Come up with something else quickly. Come on.
That's 3 million figure.
Yeah.
Do you think that's accurate? Is that inflated?
Yes, sorry. So is the 3 million figure inflated, or is it accurate? If I've remembered it correctly, and he will actually kill me if I haven't, that's come from a guy called Steve at Cybersecurity Ventures, and the amount of work they put into their research is extensive. So I do kind of trust that figure.
In one sense, that Steve figure more argue that it's, there is a shortage, just like there's barriers, like gatekeeping and unnecessary barriers of entry, for those roles. Do you think that statement's accurate in what you secure? Do you actually put that in as well?
Yeah, so is there a shortage, or is there a barrier to getting into it? There is definitely a shortage. I could not fill every single job that I have open to me right now, but there are also barriers, and there's barriers on both sides. Companies think they can't find people because they're not looking in the right places, and people that are trying to get into this have no idea where to start. The amount of people I talk to who are graduating or doing courses, and they're like, it's so hard to get a job. And I'm like, it's so not hard to get a job. People are desperate for you, and people are desperate for people at your level. So it's really that kind of conversation and that link doesn't exist. So I think you're right. I think there is a bit of a barrier. Did you have one?
I've got a couple of questions, possibly. With the salary packages and remuneration people look at, do you see it more from large established companies, or is it more smaller niche stocks areas getting more limited?
So is that larger company data, or is smaller companies innovating? A bit of both. So I would say that applies to large and small companies. And what I get told a lot by people is, I'll go work for a small company, but I want equity, I want a really massive share scheme, or a really big bonus or whatever. And a few years ago that happened. It's not really happening now. But small companies are struggling because they're having to keep up with these salaries, but they also need to compete on price. So there is definitely a little problem for the smaller companies who are having to be more innovative in what they offer. And that's where we see those companies offering home working, flexi working in the ways that your much larger companies don't. Yeah?
Counter changing the job. So back I think at least 3 months a lot of a number of people, and you can move maybe once or twice in your career for more money, but I instantly throw out CVs if I see the people that look like they're moving along, then it's not really bad sign. If you can see reasons for it in the CV, maybe you're okay, but I'd be very conscious about putting that card too often. It's dangerous. It shows that I really value like attention. People I think security particularly for internal roles, like from the ID, they have to be very good at understanding, navigating the organization, knowing where the skeletons are, knowing individuals, and that will take a long time. I value attention like being very, very high. So I would never hire someone I think they're leaving 2 years for 5K pay rise or something. So make one more point about attention, and I've had people, not too often, who have told me they've got another role because progression, and they tell me I want to be an instant responder. That's fine, but I've had people do that. They've never ever told me they want to be an instant responder. They've never once in their life. never had it. And that's one thing that I would contract with. If you want to do something, I will support you, I'll get in the training courses, things like that. But it's your job as an individual to actually say you want that, demonstrate interest in it, and get on those courses. And as a Caesar, that's the most frustrating thing in the world. When someone turns around and says, hey, yeah, I want to do that, I'm going to leave because of it.
Yeah.
On the other side.
Yeah, so I have to summarize your questions for the tape. So, so essentially, moving too often raises red flags for you in terms of that retention. And you need to go tell people what you want to do to be able to get the opportunities. It's a really interesting point, because when I started doing all these surveys, I thought the same thing, that actually if you're moving every year, maybe you can do that once or twice and then people will stop hiring you. And in a lot of other career paths, if you've moved every year or 18 months, people don't want to look at you. And we haven't seen that correction yet.
That's because security so hot. There's always
yeah.
People will employ you. But my question on that, don't forget that CV history is written for the rest of your career. It's not and you can't lie about that. You can't commit jobs, then you've got gaps in the CV. And you need references, etc.
No, I actually just want to go and reinforce what Cross is saying, especially for the ones in the beginning of their careers. I opted out, I changed jobs and whatnot, but it's super critical to build that dialogue with your management. Not just expressing the interest, but being able to have that conversation. Right? That's where the help will start. And figuring out the magic formula to build rapport with your management.
Yeah, it is really important to get that dialogue. And you're right, it's not just down to you guys to go ask your team, what do you want to do? What's your next career move? They do need to come to you. If they're at a point where they're going to go externally and look for other jobs and go through all the effort that entails, it's far less effort to come talk to you and say, I want to do this, what can you offer me? I've got 2 minutes, should we go with, yeah?
Who are being paid back because of the price of security are expected to be a certain level of seniority moves. You've seen this cascade in terms of expected behaviours and seniority because the salary. So are you seeing that expectation? So essentially, our company's expecting more for their money.
If anything, no. They're probably getting, So actually, when you look back at the data, companies are paying more for people with less experience. But I think I'm being told to wrap it up. So I will hang around if you want to come and ask me questions. But thank you very much.